as opposed to an AI having to one-shot a smart contract at the sort of point of request. It could create workflows. It could say, I want to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then it'll go out and it'll get executed through the engine. Or you can even say, hey, delegate this task to AI, give it this guardrail, and then it can do a subset of actions within your workflow. It's almost like the MCP, but on blockchain, right? Because blockchains, you have this custody problem where you need to interact with all these things that you're moving money around. So how do you do that safely? I think AI is still very young in blockchain, and there's a lot of other foundational things that need to be done first, but we are investing in that. And we expect to power AI experiences well by the end of next year.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 81 of Colors of Web3 and Entrepreneurship. My name is Lum, your Web3 host. For those of you who are new to the show, Colors of Web3 and Entrepreneurship is a show highlighting the journeys of builders and innovators in Web3 and entrepreneurship. Some topics, especially in Web3, may get technical, but we do our best to keep it accessible for most people. Here today, I'm joined by Griffin Dunaif. He's the CEO of Halliday. Griffin, could you give a quick introduction by yourself?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm Griffin. I'm the founder and CEO of Halliday. I started the company back in 2022. Prior to starting Halliday, I actually studied computer science at Stanford. I have a background in embedded systems and operating systems, and then I did some work on applied protocols, building zero-knowledge protocols and different smart contract protocols on the EVM. And then I actually left the program early in April 2022 to start Halliday, and have been building the company ever since.
Nice. So, I think it'd be pretty interesting to maybe deep dive back from the time you were like Stanford and maybe walking us forward a bit. You said you were studying CS at Stanford, and then what do you do? What have you been doing since then and leading up to this point? You can share a bit more with our audience.
Yeah, so I guess I can dive into more of what my experience at school looked like. I mean,
Sure.
I didn't, when I initially went to university, I wasn't specifically focused on crypto yet. I did get into blockchain and sort of blockchain technologies when I was there, but my initial passion was actually for lower level systems. So, how do you write software at the hardware software barrier, right? So I did some work looking at how you can build an operating system for an ARM chip. You read the ARM specification, you build an operating system from first principles. It's also kind of at that intersection of low-level systems and graphics. So I took that passion for systems, and I just sort of naturally, I liked discrete math. And, if the audience knows a lot about discrete math, that there's this sort of natural intersection with computer science and discrete math in the form of cryptography, right? A lot of cryptographic primitives rely on interesting constructions you can find in the discrete math universe. And that sort of forms this new intersection that's even more interesting to me, which is blockchains. And, I took the blockchain course, and the first slide, and this is a class taught by a professor there named Dan Bonnet, that the first slide is blockchain is the intersection of computer systems, or I think they said distributed systems, cryptography, and behavioral economics. And I saw all those three things intersecting in one place, and I was immediately hooked. I am passionate about all three of those fields and saw that in one place of study and found that really, really compelling, especially this property of blockchains where it's really the first computer where you can commit to something. It has that property that's similar to our legal institutions, but in a digital form. And that really unlocked my interest in pursuing that more seriously.
Nice, interesting. So it was all sparked from a course by Dan Bonnet. I mean, obviously, I think he's pretty renowned in the field of computer science, obviously, right? And then, so you got hooked since then, and then you just did more research. And so what was so I guess I was like your introduction to Web3, right? From like an academic perspective. But then how did you, I guess, go from that to like the more vast, bigger world of Web3 out there?
There were a few things. So one, there was just a great community of really smart, passionate people at the university who I got to know just by getting into this technology. So there's this sort of peer feedback mechanism. This was back when everybody's talking about novel DeFi primitives. This was back in the day of DeFi 2.0 and everybody was building DeFi protocols. So that was really fun. This was also when DAOs got really big. I don't know if you remember this, where everybody was creating a DAO and people were experimenting with different organizational structures. A project that I worked on that was quite interesting was, do you remember ConstitutionDAO? When there was a DAO that formed to buy the Constitution,
right?
And they got outbid. And the issue was, well, the DAO's treasury was public. And so another bidder could see their reservation price and outbid them by, let's say, $1. And that sort of defeats the purpose of the auction that was going on, because then you know how much money your opponent has, which you usually don't know at an auction. You don't know the exact bank balance of who you're competing against. And so we actually saw that problem, and we extrapolated a bit further, and we said, well, this is an issue. And it's also an issue for any organization, actually. Imagine if you're a business owner and your competitors see exactly what you're spending on, exactly what your bank balance is.
Yeah.
That's not going to fly for this technology to become mature for business use cases. So I actually ended up working on and subsequently posted sort of a paper that sort of walks, I won't call it paper, it's more like an academic article on the internet about protocol. And we implemented a protocol that actually solves this problem using zero knowledge techniques, where instead of storing your assets in your address, we use a clever technique to store many companies' balances in a single smart contract. And then you can sort of obscure who owns those funds using a ZK implementation of an encryption scheme called Al-Gamal, which is a public-private key encryption scheme. And so that solved the problem of storing your funds as an organization and spending it privately. And that was a super interesting project to work on. And this is before, ZK VMs really became a thing. So, we were writing these circuits in a framework called CirCom, which is quite, they call it precarious to use it. And then the second thing that got me really into crypto is actually Axie Infinity, which I could sort of go into a tangent as to why, but it was sort of that academic project and seeing blockchain gaming emerge that got me hacking.
Interesting. Yeah. So you saw the problem with the DAO back then. I mean, things, I guess it's like one of the strength and also was like a weakness of blockchain, right? Everything is like visible on chain. But then in that case, you said where the competitor could see how much money you have, they got outbid and created a problem, and you guys solving that. And I guess it was like at least like how many years ago was this? Like at least like,
I guess this was actually 2021. This is like November 2021.
4 years. Yeah. Okay.
And then this project, I worked on it with Dan during that winter quarter, which was also 2022. And then I left school in April 2022, which is the spring quarter. So it's right before, there's 3 quarters at the university. So I did those first 2 quarters, and the last quarter I left to start Halliday.
Awesome. Cool. And then you said that you venture into the world of blockchain gaming to Axie Infinity. Back then, I think Axie was really a big thing. Yeah.
It was. So the story behind that is it was actually in lecture, and the professor who was teaching the class who was doing that lecture, he went up to a block explorer. I just think to give an example of what does a block explorer look like? What's being transacted? And the transaction just actually happened to be from Axie Infinity. It's a total accident. And he was like, oh, this is a blockchain game, and they're using the blockchain to assign and record keep ownership in this digital economy. And this is sort of, maybe this is the future of gaming, and this idea of the metaverse to have real digital property and sovereign ownership. And my reaction when I saw that, I was like, I sort of had this reaction. I was like, no way they actually did it. Like, there's somebody using the blockchain to power an in-game digital economy. And I think that's a really interesting idea. And it's actually sort of the history of the company, is we actually got into crypto through that lens of really believing in digital civilization and metaverses. Turns out that's going to take a lot longer than I think we expected. But, Axie had a really interesting property, which was, there were these guilds, these organizations that formed that raised venture capital to buy property and then rent it out to people. And I think the structurally interesting property of that is that this is the first time I think there's really been true venture scale businesses in a digital world. You had enough property rights to be confident somebody holding a portfolio of digital assets. And that idea was very sticky. And we started thinking about, hey, maybe you can build a bank for that ecosystem instead of a rental facility or a holding company that these guilds were. And actually, this sort of led to Halliday, which was initially a protocol designed to let people buy NFTs, specifically in blockchain games, using debt as opposed to having to rent forever.
Interesting. So I think that, well, it's like a kind of a good segue into how you kind of the original, like the origin story of Halliday as well, right? How you also came up with it. Yeah, cool. Yeah. So, well, actually, before we deep dive into Halliday, I just want to know some fun question about you as well. Like, can you share with us what you do for fun in your free time?
That's a good question. I mean, I mostly work and I have fun working. I think outside of that, I like to spend time with my wonderful partner and go on hikes in the Bay Area, get outside the city. But other than that, I just love blockchain. I love technology. Work is play. When you got your own company, there's this infinite stuff to do. So I'd be remiss to say that I have hobbies. I don't really have hobbies outside of just working and seeing my partner and friends when not working.
Gotcha. So you're like fully locked in and head down building.
Just locked in.
Yeah.
I don't want to do anything else.
Yeah, awesome. That's good. That's cool. I mean, I think we both know that Web3 is a very fast-growing industry and lots of new development. So obviously, you have to always be on top, right, to stay on top. Yeah, so I think that also make a perfect segue to, could you maybe share with us a bit more about like the origin story in more details of Halliday, and maybe share with us what you guys are building at Halliday as well in details?
Yeah. It actually did come from Axie, and the initial vision for the company was to make it much easier for any user to own a digital asset. And the way we went about that is we actually wanted to build the Afterpay, but for crypto. So it's sort of paying for lending business. We've since pivoted from that, but the sort of original vision of the company was unlocking access to the digital economy through paying for financing, paying for installments instead of having to pay for digital assets upfront. And we remember too, like the prices of all these NFTs were growing exponentially, and it got increasingly difficult for people to afford any digital asset. And so we actually struck out to build that business and offer this sort of payments product to blockchain games. What's interesting though is that nobody really wanted BNPL for NFTs. The NFT market pretty much evaporated. Terra Luna exploded, FTX happened. So we entered, the market took a turn after April 2022, and there was a sort of extended period of pain and suffering in crypto. Yeah. And what was interesting though is that we were actually very fortunate to find a second application of our technology, and that was sort of actually inspired by our early clients in gaming. And one of the really interesting things about gaming was that they were the first blockchain projects to operate on app chains. And this is before everybody was launching L2s on Ethereum. This is before rollups as a service. And we actually ended up working with a game called DeFi Kingdoms, which is one of the original and largest blockchain games. And they came to us and they said, we've had this persistent problem, which is users can't even get to their first dollar on the chain. It's just hard to on-ramp. It's hard just to navigate from Avalanche seed chain to our subnet and acquire a Joule token. And we started looking into this, and we experienced too, because we were trying to build a lender and we had to move all these funds around all these different chains. And we were like, oh, wow. We're looking at, we're spending 95% of our time building plumbing and orchestration infrastructure. We're not building lending. We're not doing any lending. We're building all this infrastructure so that we can lend, but we never actually got to do any lending. And part of that was the market, which is fair. But the other part of it too was none of the infrastructure we needed to build this higher level service existed. And put simply, the infrastructure that wasn't there was some sort of multi-chain orchestration system. There are no abstractions that tie together computing across many different blockchains. Right now, if you want to build a multi-chain service, it's the Wild West. You just got to build everything yourself. There's no virtualization. There's no cloud that abstracts away all the heterogeneous components. There's cross-chain bridges, et cetera, but there's no real computing framework. And we actually set out to go build that. And once we recognized the sort of core property of that problem, we said, look, we're not going to do lending. We're going to focus on this core computing problem and reinvent that and make it 10,000 times easier to build applications on blockchains without you having to write smart contracts or worry about all the different chains that are involved.
I see. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. That's like obviously we both know that the market suffered a huge blowback, right? After, FTX, Luna, and then NFT also almost like not evaporated, but like just a huge drop in NFT sales and over time. And then that's interesting. So you guys basically found like a new use case, basically, right? When you were building out for a client. I still remember DeFi Kingdom. I think I tried it a bit back then. It was like a game, but I didn't really get the point of the game that we used for to conquer or something. But anyway, yeah, interesting. So then you were building the plumbing, and then from there you realized that there was a need for this plumbing more than the actual product which you were planning to build, which is like the lending, right? Buy now, pay later.
Yes, and what's interesting though is that the plumbing, it's sort of like, you start with a product, built the plumbing. We realized that this plumbing was really valuable.
Yeah.
And then we built the product from the plumbing again. So you do this like hop like that. And the product now, and the way I sort of set the stage for the product is that things have gotten very fragmented in a few different ways in blockchain. And the sort of problem we're focusing on now, and the problem that we solve for DeFi Kingdoms and are now solving for over 40 clients, is how do users deposit their first dollar in your crypto app? And your crypto app could be a neobank, it could be an on-chain game, it could be a prediction market. And you're probably familiar with that deposit button. That's a critical button in your application. Why? Because the amount that's deposited into your app is essentially the potential energy of that app. That's the dry powder that you can transform into motion in your ecosystem. And so we looked at that and we said, look, it's broken right now. And why is it broken? Well, it's gotten extremely fragmented across three axes. The first axis is just crypto. Well, your crypto exists in many places now. It exists on Solana. It exists in MetaMask or Phantom, on Avalanche or Arbitrum, on Bitcoin, in many different places. The second problem is that fiat exists in many places too. And on and off ramps are also incredibly fragmented. On and off ramp in the US may not work as well in Nigeria, which may not work as well in Southeast Asia. You need different fiat rails for different jurisdictions. And then the last thing is there's over 500 million people who have their funds in centralized exchanges, which is a totally different venue of liquidity. And when you think about a deposit experience, you need to build a sort of a workflow or a user flow that meets users at all three of those channels. So you need to build a cross-chain swap aggregator. You need to build a global on and off ramp network, and you need to build a centralized exchange connector. If you add all of this up, do all those integrations, orchestrate all those different flows, build to all those virtual machines and integrate the bridges and the DEXs and combine that into a single API, that's like 2 years of work and $10 million of development. And this is why there are no crypto apps, because everybody is just repeating the same incredibly laborious plumbing. Everybody's building plumbing instead of building apps. We're building all of the plumbing for you so that you don't need to.
Interesting. Yeah. I think when you put it like that, then I think we understand the magnitude of the fragmentation even better, right? Obviously, you said you have crypto now exists on multiple different blockchain. Of course, we have EVM, very strong, probably some of the biggest ecosystem out there for sure. And then you have Solana, and then you have Cosmos and Polkadot, and then you said fiat also have different on-ramp and off-ramp rails, right? Like they're not all the same. Obviously, the USD exchange to maybe Japanese yen or some currency in Malaysia would probably be different, right? And then like you said, people have a lot of money holding on centralized exchange, right? And how to bridge all of that. And interesting. So basically, you turning all of those like hundreds of different API into like one simple workflow. Is that correct? And maybe share with us more about that. How you're solving that problem. There.
So we're combining all these sources of liquidity, all these different venues. And I'd frame our product as we're a way with a single API meeting every user globally where they are. So we've integrated all the centralized exchanges. We've integrated global on and off ramps. We've integrated cross-chain swaps and all the different virtual machines into a single API and checkout experience. So you can pay with crypto, you can pay with fiat, and you can pay with your centralized exchange balance. So you can pay with your Binance account at the point of sale. You can pay with your Coinbase account and acquire a new asset at the point of sale. And you as the developer can reveal that natural preference to the user. Maybe a user wants to pay with crypto or their centralized exchange or fiat without doing 50 different integrations, negotiating all those contracts, and doing years of engineering work, which it really is, to make these things reliable and global and work on every chain and support every token across all payment methods. It's an entire business to build, and it distracts from your core mission, which is probably your product and your customers. And unless you're a plumbing business, it's not going to move the needle the same way.
Makes sense. And yeah, you share with us more about how it works under the hood? You're probably like the main architect anyway. Yeah.
There are a few different ways to look at it. Like one analogy I like to use is, I think this problem in crypto is similar to a Web2 industry, which actually turned out to be very large, which is, are you familiar with ETL? So like ETL pipelines, big data pipelines, that's called extract, transform, load. Exactly. And so we are in Spirit. It's a similar idea. So we built out a workflow engine that knows how to connect to all these different heterogeneous components. So on-ramps, exchanges, DEXs, bridges, blockchains. And then we unify all those different data formats into a single workflow execution format. So basically we build these execution graphs that form a reliable execution strategy. And so it lets you take a centralized exchange as step one. Step two might be a bridge. Step three might be a DEX. And step four might be a transfer to a user wallet. And our API surfaces this workflow engine as a cohesive experience. But behind the scenes, the technology is integrating all these components, unifying them into a central backbone, and then executing these state transitions across all these integrations reliably across chains. And so doing all those three things is quite challenging. I mean, one is just, you got to do all the integrations. There's no way around it. You've got to get it done. And perhaps the most challenging thing is you have to build a general purpose architecture that knows how to take all these different data formats, combine them into a unified format, and then execute it reliably. And so that's like it's almost like building a computer, but a sort of application-specific computer that's orchestrating all these components. And that's exactly what we've done. We built these complex smart contracts that can orchestrate all these components seamlessly, regardless of the chain you're on.
Interesting. So then for the user, obviously a lot of this is just abstracted away, right? And then so it's just a developer just integrate with your SDK, and then in a way, and then it would seems almost like magic for the user, I would say.
Yeah. It does. And one of the strong benefits of our technology too is that it is actually all self-custody. It's all a smart contract protocol too. So we're doing these sophisticated automations while still preserving a lot of the core values and properties of blockchains that are really important to us. One being self-custody. Like you're not sending your funds to a wallet and then letting that wallet do things on your behalf and orchestrate for you. But that's not what we're here to do. This is actually an immutable smart contract-based system where, say I want to on-ramp to DeFi kingdoms. You can set up an on-ramp. It'll deposit to, we call it a one-time wallet, which is a smart contract wallet that will then run the automations and do all the sophisticated orchestration for you, saving you hours. You don't need to figure out bridging, DEXs, integrating with the ramp, figuring out the flow, retry logic. You can almost think of us as an alternative to smart contracts on some level. You've basically one other option when you're building an application like this. You can go write Solidity, build all the supporting infrastructure around it, build an application, surface this functionality to your users, or you can use a higher level runtime. You can build a workflow that lets you say, do step A, step B, step C, step D, and we'll do it for you without you having to become an expert in smart contracts.
Nice. So I guess heading more into a world like intent-based, is that correct? I mean, I think from the user perspective, they just care about like, hey, I just want to, like you said, like get the first dollar to play this game, to make a bet on a prediction market, to buy an NFT or whatever it may be, right? And then so the user state the intent, and then obviously through the integration of your SDK of your protocol, and then it execute everything through the smart contract. That sounds pretty
exactly
correct.
And I should say it is an intent-centric design. I mean, the way that I frame that is, intents to me as somebody who studied computer science is just another way of saying declarative. Declarative just means you set sort of a higher level constraint and you let the computer optimize a way to satisfy that constraint. The most popular example of a declarative system that many people use and are familiar with is SQL, right? If you do select star, over a table, the computer actually does a lot of clever stuff for you. It goes and maybe we're going to do sorted first, maybe we won't because you're only querying 10 rows and a linear scan's cheaper. Maybe you're going to use an index, this, that. And you can look at the query planning. So the computer is actually really smart. It's similar for us when you say, we let you define these data structures that are workflows. And then after you define those high-level attributes, which are cryptographically encoded in the workflow, you actually commit to them via sort of a hashing mechanism. Then the protocol has flexibility within those constraints to fulfill the request. And the reason you may want flexibility, right, is sort of price optimization. That's one. That's sort of one that's commonly cited. But another one that's actually less appreciated is just reliability. Gas fees change. Sometimes a nonce expires and you got to try again. Like there's just all these little things where just a little bit more flexibility improves the robustness of the system. And that's been a challenge with self-custodial technology is it's been very hard to make it robust, especially across many chains where you lose the atomicity guarantees. And I think that's one of the innovations we sort of brought to market is we've built a really robust workflow system across many blockchains that can retry, it has fault tolerance while preserving that sort of intent-centric design.
I see. Yeah, that's really cool. I think one of the things that, we both know in blockchain is that it's from time to time, there'll be like some failures, right? Obviously for like transaction, I guess it's like transaction management is like one of the area where you have to do retry gas management. There's some error that may happen, right? So there is a way that we will handle the failure like among the mid flow, right? Because I'm kind of imagining that obviously it's not going to be successful 100% time. Right? There's got to be a failure handling. How do you design that into that?
So that goes exactly to the intent-centric design or the declarative structure of the system. So we handle all that for you. If you say your workflow has step 1, step 2, step 3, and it just fails in step 2 for whatever reason, the system will retry that step. Sort of on an exponential back off, just be like, boom, we'll try it. We'll try with different parameters. And the reason we can do this is because we encode at a higher level the procedure of that workflow. So we're not presetting the gas. We're not presetting these things. There's actually flexibility in the parameters, but the intent, the high level instructions are cryptographically set. So it's finding this right balance between declaration and flexibility. That's a really interesting problem. And it's the same thing with SQL, right? You get what you want, but there's many ways to get what you want depending on the situation. And we've done that except for, this asynchronous processing across blockchains. And you're bound to get failures. There's always gas spikes. Sometimes there's just ephemeral failures. There's a bug in the smart contract, and for whatever reason it failed with that set of arguments. You got to try a new one, or you got to roll over to another contract as opposed to trying to use specific DEX. You got to use a different DEX. There's all these different situations where you need alternative or changes to your execution at the runtime.
Makes sense. Yeah. Wow. I guess it must be really tough to design such a almost foolproof or robust system, right, to handle that. Yeah. And as we know that, I think we live in like a chain where there will be more and more blockchains or new chains emerging, and then even the virtual machine of some of the thing will go through upgrade or hard fork, right? So I guess I'm curious about like how do you maintain like forward compatibility? Like will existing workflow just automatically adapt, or does the developer need to reconfigure?
Yeah, no. We'll maintain forward compatibility, and again, that's part of this principle of the way the workflow engine works. Is it's actually a smart contract, but it's a smart contract written for that blockchain that exposes, call it a runtime environment, which is basically it's its own development point where you can write programs, or we for all intents and purposes we call them workflows. You can write workflows to this engine, and look, as long as the blockchain maintains its property of being somewhat Turing complete, that it has a smart contract language, we can just implement the logic we want. So we abstract away a lot of the components of the underlying chain. So as the chain forks and they add new opcodes and remove opcodes, you have the engine, which actually abstracts away all those details and exposes a uniform interface to the higher level runtime system. And I'm very confident that we'll have forward compatibility. maybe at points it won't give you immediate access to the newest opcode. But for our use case and for what people are using us for, that's not why they're using our product. I'll give you another analogy, which is I always like to joke, when's the last time you wrote a website in C? Probably never. You probably always used HTML and JavaScript. Well, JavaScript's actually called the glue language because the purpose of JavaScript, you're not building a database in JavaScript. You're talking to a database, you're talking to all these different services, and you're gluing it together into a high-level scripting language. It's called scripting language. We're doing the same thing for blockchain. We're saying, look, there's a large application segment of people who just want to stitch together existing protocols. They want to do Uniswap, bridge, hit a marketplace, do some if-then logic, store the output, done. They don't want to build Uniswap. They don't want to build the bridge protocol or some really nitty-gritty protocol. They want to script. And there's no scripting tools for blockchain. You have to write Solidity, which is like forcing people to write C when they want to write a script. And you don't necessarily get all the nitty-gritty details of C immediately, but you get much more flexibility and leverage.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. And then, so obviously, I think we've seen also many other similar tools that only does like a fraction or like some portion of what you do. Right? It's a certain on-ramp, off-ramp tool, right? Whom do you actually consider to be like some competitors of people building similar things in the space?
Yeah, we've got a few different competitors out there. I would say we partner actually with. I'm just upfront. The on and off ramps are very important partners to us, and we don't compete with them at all. They're sort of these constituencies in a network we're trying to build and they're very valuable and focused on their specific jurisdictions and products and their KYC users. And they have a totally different business structure. They're regulated financial products, which is a totally different universe. Like we are a technology and an access layer. And so we view ourselves as a way of surfacing a user preference that already exists. We're not trying to capture that side of the market. And it's not at all what we're doing. From a competitive lens, though, there are startups in this category that compete with us. There's one called DymoPay. It's a startup, sort of similar idea, combining all these different ways to pay into a single checkout experience. Yeah. I can think of people who I consider substitutes, not necessarily a competitor. Like I don't know what their long-term vision is, but we've seen them in sales. I'd say it's Mesh Connect is one of them. They're trying to connect to centralized exchanges and offer that as a cohesive checkout experience. But we're unique in that we've really focused on this innovation at the protocol layer, building this interstitial runtime as a smart contract protocol. And then we're adding all these things at the edge of the network, right? Global on and off ramps, centralized exchanges. But our real innovation and our key advantage is that we've built this really novel smart contract system.
Nice. Yeah, makes sense. I've actually used DymoPay sometime in the past. It's like one of the very interesting use case, right? To peer-to-peer payment, I would say, in some way, right? Very easy, pretty simple to use as well. Cool. And I mean, so it sounds like everything is going well. I mean, companies have raised a lot of funding, but any particular challenges that your company is facing at this moment? Is it with adoption, technology, any other challenge that you have?
The technology is hard for sure. And we've had to raise a lot of money to build it and sort of work with the best people. Because the nature of what we're building, there are really only a small number of people in the world who have the expertise to do this. There are not a lot of people who are familiar with cryptography. There are not a lot of people and professionals who've built real protocols. Like it's one thing to build a SaaS product. And trust me, it's very hard to build a SaaS product. But to build a real novel smart contract protocol, and there are not that many anymore. Like a lot of the blockchain innovation, like there's a few of the layer 2s, the layer 1s, but it's few and far between when it comes to like real immutable smart contract based protocols. And so we had to find and recruit those people. And
interesting. I'm kind of curious on that part. Like what do you say is like the discipline needed, right, to be able to build what you're building, the expertise?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's this intersection of capabilities that I think is extraordinarily rare. One, it's just you got to be a great systems engineer. So I sort of put this in the category of, are you very detail oriented? Do you know how to build abstractions, interlinks, and data systems and reliable fault tolerant distributed systems? And so that's broadly just systems engineering. I think the second thing is you also have to have like downloaded this module into your brain, which is like, I call it cryptographic awareness. Like you don't need to be a cryptographer. It's great, but that's another level of like, there are even fewer people who you could say that you could call them a cryptographer. But you need to be cryptographically aware to the extent that you conceptualize the different trust models and how that impacts a system. It's not just, I know what a signature is. I know what an ECDSA signature is. You have to think about, okay, my protocol is spawning, a data structure that has this trust model where somebody signs and somebody else executes, and you can't change, the executor can't change the commitment of the signer. And sort of thinking about these systems as these multi-party systems between, people committing, across the trust barrier. And then maybe the last thing is just an awareness and experience with the underlying virtual machines in the wild and understanding how they interact, the transaction models, the blockchains, the opcodes on the EVM and the SVM and the different data models, the account model on the SVM versus the data storage model and computing model on Ethereum. And then maybe the last thing is actually, the economic side. I don't think that's the most important, but it's still important to sort of understand, okay, we have to think about staking and the economic security and the game theory. And when you sort of multiply all those probabilities, if there are probably not that many people who've thought about all these things.
I see. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I feel like each of those fields already, I guess 10,000 now become expert, right? And then if you take, 10,000, I don't know, even if you translate into time, maybe 5 to 7 years, and 5 to 7 years each of those field, maybe even let's just say 3 of the field, right? They already have like minimum of 15, 20 years experience just to be an expert in those. So yeah, like you said, okay. That's,
I think one thing I can add too, for specifically for smart contracts, when you build a smart contract, it's actually very, very different than the development process of typical SaaS. And the reason I say that is the modern software development framework, right, is CI/CD, right, continuous integration and continuous deployment. When it's done, it just immediately ships to cloud, it goes through an auto deployment process, boom, you're in production. Can't do that with a smart contract. A smart contract it's actually more akin to building a piece of hardware. Once you launch your contract, it's kind of a rocket ship, and then it's out there and it's just going to do its thing. And it's a very, very different development process. It's more like, you spec up front. You have to think strategically, if we're going to spend 2 years building this thing, you have to go down all these pathways. And it's really expensive to change, right? Because not just your contracts that change, it's all your data layer that changes. It's your backend that changes. It's almost like building, like a CPU or one of these sort of larger investment technologies. And that too is a really hard skill to find because most engineers don't work that way, right? Unless you're in like the semiconductor industry, but then they're not going to be a software engineer either, right? So it's like you have to find these sort of experts who are software engineers, but also understand the sort of patience and strategy required to build a protocol. And that's why sort of these, the idea of a protocol expert is so coveted in crypto.
I see. Yeah, it's like you said, it's very hard. I feel like one of the good example would be like if you need to know how to build like a Tesla, right? I think Tesla have really mastered like the art of obviously build cars but the car can get the software updates on there, right? And then so that allow you to upgrade the car over time. But but having a mindset to build that is obviously very hard because the car you cannot change the hardware as easily. Right? Big thing to fix. So that's cool. Sounds like a very complicated to build what you guys are building. How many people are working in your company at the moment?
We are 23 people.
Nice. Would you say majority is engineering?
Just slightly, yes. But we actually have a pretty, large section of the team is non-technical. And this is actually another really interesting thing, maybe about just being an entrepreneur in crypto that I can speak to is it's more interdisciplinary than what I've witnessed at comparable size companies in different industries. Maybe, I can sort of pick on AI companies. I know a lot of great AI founders creating great businesses. And one of the things that's interesting is, I don't have a friend who's, Series A AI company who has a general counsel who is an ex-regulator. You got to think about that. You're dealing with money. You have to think about compliance at the state level, at the federal level, at the sort of equivalent levels of all the other jurisdictions you operate in globally. So it's not just state and federal in the United States. It's the equivalent bifurcations in any country where that's relevant. So you have to sort of understand how serious that is. and then structure your products in a way that's compliant. And so, I've had to become very aware, and I've had to become an expert in compliance and being regulatory first. And that's also, one of the really important things that we've embraced early on is we said, we are going to do things the right way. And it's a core principle of the company. In crypto too, you need that marketing is really important. It's a global, always online industry. And so companies at our stage usually have a head of marketing that is not as common at, AI SaaS business. And so you sort of add all these things and you see that, the non-technical teams at crypto or in a crypto company, they actually grow very quickly and they're really, really critical. And they're very critical in building out the rest of the organization separate from the technology innovation, because you really need those components too. Like if you don't have that side locked down either, it doesn't matter how good your tech is.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, crypto is just as much interdisciplinary as one of the more disciplinary field that I feel like, because like you said, right, you need to have expertise in computer science, but also like psychology, how human think, and then behavioral economics, and then like design and UI UX design, a lot of computer science stuff, and some other fields also I think apply in here as well too. So that's quite a lot of different knowledge that you have to pack up right into a small field. And right now, if I understand correctly, I think your business model you mentioned is a SaaS, right? So you're selling to companies that need to integrate, make the onboarding or on-ramping process easier for user. Is that correct? Would you say like majority of your business and revenues?
Yeah, our business is B2B, and the way we talk about it is it's just a unified API for every way to pay. It's crypto payments. It's accessing a global on and off ramp network. So we're building a network of providers who want to make it easy for their users to find them. I really like this idea of we're an access layer. We're a single API that lets users access what they already want to do. If I'm KYC'd in one place and I know the brand, I'm going to stick with it. And we surface that to the user really easily. It's almost like a browser. And then, centralized exchange payments in a single API to power that deposit experience for your application so that you can get your users to their first dollar spent in seconds instead of, 45 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, this is certainly obviously a big pain point that many protocols and dApps that face. Any traction, some numbers that you can share with us?
Yeah. I mean, so we power a litany of clients. We have over 40 clients. Nice. I can name a few of them. We're in Avalanche's core wallet. We power the portal for ApeChain. So if you do an on-ramp to ApeChain, that complicated multi-chain orchestration, the technology behind the orchestration is Halliday. And we actually power the entire checkout experience for StoryChain. So on Story Protocol, if you go to and you buy IP on their main website and on their DEX and on their liquid staking protocol as well, that's Halliday. One of the challenges for a new layer one is how do you support all these different payment methods if they all don't support the chain on day one? So we can also extend support for all these payment methods to a new chain on day one. And so that's sort of why Story worked with us.
Nice. Awesome. And I think we both know that, Story is probably seems like doing really well after they mainnet recently, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Huge value. And it's like a very new unlock for the IPs industry or IP creators. Yeah.
That's really cool. No, they're really pushing the gamut.
Yeah, cool. And just curious, so what everything seems like going well. What is your plan going forward? Maybe in the next 6 to 12 months, any exciting development or on your roadmap that you can share with us?
Yeah, so we actually ported and built an integration for our protocol for Solana. So we're launching Solana support very soon in the next couple of months. That's really exciting because it's the first time you're going to have a cohesive computing environment across not just all the different EVMs that exist, but also the SVMs. So you can do a workflow, you can do a payment from an exchange to Solana to Base to Arbitrum to an L3 in a single click, all in self-custody, all powered by the smart contract protocol. So we're sort of growing out that base layer to let you build these really sophisticated orchestrations. This is all in pursuit of making it really easy for users to pay, but also this foundational infrastructure being there is going to unlock just innovation within the Solana ecosystem. And that's something that I'm really excited about.
It's exciting. And I think we both know that, Solana is probably one of the top blockchain platform right there for developers. Onboarding them certainly mean a lot more people will get to joining Web3. Cool. Just a couple more questions before we close out the show. How will technically you said like agentic workflow. There's probably is there any even AI components in your thing? It's all smart contract, right? So I'm also
no, that's something, we focused more for the last year on that payments use case. But we are very interested in agentic commerce. We're in Silicon Valley. We can't help but, witness the sort of evolution of intelligent computing. And the way we think about AI and how we would like to contribute to AI on blockchain is, our protocol can serve as the arms and legs for agentic commerce. As opposed to an AI having to one-shot a smart contract at the sort of point of request, it could create workflows. It could say, I want to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then it'll go down and it'll get executed through the engine. Or you can even say, hey, delegate this task to AI, give it this guardrail, and then it can do a subset of actions within your workflow. And so that's how we think about AI, is that it's a very complementary technology. It's almost like the MCP, but on blockchain, right? Because blockchains, you have this custody problem where you need to interact with all these things that you're moving money around. So how do you do that safely? It's not the focus right now. I think AI is still very young in blockchain, and there's a lot of other foundational things that need to be done first, but we are investing in that, and we expect to power AI experiences well within by the end of next year.
Nice. Wow, that's would be a very exciting development. I was reading somewhere that like in the future there'll be, obviously we're living in a world there'll be more and more agents, right? And then these like autonomous agent. And if what you were mentioning that you would like to become like the underlying protocol for agentic commerce, right? So what I'm imagining at that point is like, so all these payment, obviously, if they handle things on behalf of humans, organization, right, they need a way to pay each other, right? Like to do payment from one agent to another to do whatever workflow someone needs to execute. Is that something that you might be thinking about as well?
Absolutely. It's really the question of what are the arms and legs for these AIs to actually do things on a blockchain. You really have two options. Either they're going to issue a ton of transactions from a custodial wallet. That's not going to work for compliance reasons. You can't take custody of somebody's assets. You need a self-custody system. So either it's going to live in your browser and your browser is going to do a bunch of magic stuff. And I'm skeptical of that architecture. Or you're going to have some sort of trust broker that functions as a smart contract where you can delegate authority to the AI to do a subset of actions on your behalf. And you could actually use our protocol to do those things. Your protocol could serve as the arms and legs for autonomous systems. And that's something we'll certainly be experimenting with as our focus matures and payments matures.
Awesome. I think we know that. I think payment will be one of the, I feel like a very strong use case PMF for crypto. So if we can somehow help that, like linking the two worlds of AI and Web3 together, that'd be really awesome. Cool. And do you have any, well, since you've been building your company for a while now, do you have any advice for people who want to start their own, Web3 company, or like just start their own startup in general?
Yeah, I think the most important advice, I do think this is actually really important for anybody, just like starting a company perspective. And it's something that I've learned too, just doing business, is only work with people you trust. Never break that rule. You will thank me later. I think that's like, trust is it's the real sort of invisible medium through which things get done. And it's the joke of like, if you needed a 100-line contract to work with somebody, you'll be worrying about why you didn't have the 101st page. But you need to divide and conquer. You need to trust people. And so I think that's like the most abstract business advice. And it's generic advice, but it's actually very true. It's just only work with people you trust. And then in crypto, I do think that we ought to focus on, there ought to be more entrepreneurs building real protocols. Blockchains and the core value proposition of a blockchain is self-custody. It is decentralized technology. And we're actually at a point in the industry where there's a bit of a risk now. Like there's a lot of technologies that are claiming to be self-custody that are not self-custody. And if we sort of return to fully controlled SaaS, we're sort of back where we started. But building self-custody and building protocols is really hard. But I think we need people and entrepreneurs who have that expertise to actually bring those things to life. Because again, I don't think there have been that many real production-ready protocols that have been launched recently outside of, some recent DeFi protocols, the Optimistic and ZKL2s. But there, there's a lot more not that than there is that in crypto. And I think we want to sort of reverse that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think we definitely need more people and builders into the blockchain and Web3 space in general. And yeah, what you said about, I think, divide and conquer, and also like building with people you trust, I think that makes a lot of sense, because you can't really go far, right? I mean, it's how the trust. I mean, I guess there was like a saying that if you want to go fast, go by yourself. You want to go far, right? Go together, right? So you definitely need the trust to go the long route. And right now, you're building for the long route, obviously. So it's a tough one. Yeah. Cool. And final question, where can people follow you and your company? Feel free to share any public handles or website where you want people to follow.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, our Twitter handle is at Halliday HQ, HALLIDAY HQ. And then my Twitter handle is Griffin TIER. So GRIFFIN TIER on Twitter.
Cool. Yeah, I'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes down below, so for the people to check it out, for both the listener as well too. They can check it out. Once again, Griffin, thank you for coming on the show and sharing about what Halliday is building. I think it'd be really cool to be the protocol that help to power and onboard many people to blockchain and crypto. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we're back to my studio. What do you think about what Griffin and his team are building at Halliday? You may have actually used an app whose on-ramp or swap component was powered by Halliday Unified API already without knowing it. Feel free to leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. For the next episode, we'll be talking to Patrick Wood. He's the CEO of DEXs Capital Markets. DEXs is a publicly traded fintech-focused capital market solution company, focusing in the areas of structured finance and risk management. We'll be talking about the cryptocurrency structured products for corporations and institutions. If you enjoyed this episode about Web3 and entrepreneurship, please give a like and subscribe. It means a lot to us. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.